One does not simply ease back into Doom Eternal. A month after publishing my review earlier this year, I tried playing through the campaign again on the Nightmare difficulty and was met with shameful repeated deaths in the first level. I figured playing the game a second time on Ultraviolence wouldn't hurt since it was still challenging without being ridiculously punishing. However, I'd lost something. My aim wasn't as precise. My movement was off just enough to cost me precious glory kills and escape routes. My multitasking didn't take full advantage of the Doomslayer's inventory. All of this was a result of failing to reach what game director Hugo Martin calls the fun zone, a flow of consciousness state achieved by internalizing the ins and outs of the game's rules, tools, and ghouls. I initially experienced the same roadblock in the expansion titled The Ancient Gods, Part 1. Once I had played for a couple hours, I realized head knowledge alone isn't enough to enter the fun zone. I had to slowly feel and earn my way back into it. And once I did, I remembered why Eternal is one of the best first-person shooters. When I didn't, I realized it was not only due to my own incompetence, but also new yet puzzling design choices. Because of that, The Ancient Gods Part 1 is Eternal at its best and worst in a complicated tangle of ways. So let's talk about it. From the start, you'll notice the expansion is drop-dead gorgeous, with one of the game series' most breathtaking places, a sprawling facility built out at sea, both above and below its surface. As you explore its bowels and flit among its open sky bridges, a gritty, more industrial version of Camino from Star Wars will come to mind, not to mention the titular battle from the Clone Wars once the facility is gradually destroyed by the Slayer's sabotage. Flaming flotsam fills the ocean to contrast with the grand, stormy expanse. You should expect the unexpected with yet another biome in the form of a foggy bog in hell, as well as a return to the Geiger-inspired biomechanical metropolis of Urdak, newly corrupted by demonic influence with its skybox, fauna, and enemies. Just as Eternal stretched the art department's creative muscles with environmental diversity, the expansion leans further into this with pleasing results that had me oohing and ahhing all the way. The same satisfaction extends to the level design. You've got more multi-tiered playgrounds to jump around, swing across, and teleport within, all while avoiding their environmental hazards. Familiar yet well-integrated ones return, like errant flames and floors of electricity, but there are new hazards as well, like exploding spore pods, mostly intended to keep you moving rather than be used against demons. More interesting hazards are found in singular encounters, such as one with a circular arena shrouded in thick fog, a battleground with about a dozen pillars that change in height and are electrified, and a long Dagobah-like pathway filled with poisonous gas where you're forced to stay inside these safety bubbles as demons pour in from all sides. Like Eternal, the expansion finds a nice balance with half of the encounters being straightforward yet challenging, and the other half being characterized by the aforementioned novelties in level design that limit sight and space. If I had to generally differentiate the expansion in this regard, I'd say levels are tighter and narrower, with more hallways and walkways that make you think about not getting sandwiched between demons, which manages to be both exciting and annoying because of unpredictable results despite strategic movement. I have no ambiguous feelings over how new enemies adversely affect gameplay. The problem emerges early on with eye turrets, which pop in and out of these pedestals to blast you with purple energy. Then, the Blood Makers, a demonic version of Maker Angels, who I wish had been introduced in the base game, come along with staffs that shoot out energy balls and electricity nets that slow down movement. Their only weakness is a single headshot with the heavy assault rifle, akin to their lesserkin. Lastly, the spirits, vengeful ghosts of summoners from the first game, enhance the power, speed, and health of demons twofold, and these apparitions can only be eliminated by the microwave beam. There are cloaked whiplashes as well, but they don't really feel like a new addition and are easily exposed by setting them on fire or freezing them for visibility. What all of these have in common is forcing the player to momentarily slow down and even stop. Both the turrets and Bloodmakers require this approach with the tactical scope attachment. While PC players may not relate to and scoff at this, it's not friendly to console players. They must center their aim and turn on target snapping out of necessity to avoid standing in place to adjust their aim after zooming in. Even then, Bloodmakers make this hard to pull off since they're only vulnerable while firing those paralyzing nets at you, which often made me eat health and armor while standing still for a second or two to get rid of them. However, spirits are the greatest offender to Doom's DNA by requiring that you use the worst attachment in the game. And why is it the worst? It's because the microwave beam brings you to a snail's pace for a cursed 5 seconds as it does its underwhelming magic. When all of these enemies are combined, the expansion introduces antithetical elements to Eternal by prompting the pumping of brakes on movement, which made me die plenty of times since I had to risk killing these new foes to prevent encounters from being any harder or longer. In one case, my inability to eliminate a spirit made an encounter last for more than 10 minutes, since I had little to no openings to use the microwave beam. Most enemy-specific weaknesses rightly require general accuracy with quick solutions. Even the Marauders, who I've come to tolerate more since my Eternal review with my discovery of properly using weapon switching to bypass reloading. They're still a nuisance to handle amid hectic frays, but they always made me appreciate how near perfectly airtight and consistent the game design is to foster thrilling, multi-layered, fire-and-forget gameplay. The Ancient Gods Part 1 made this gulf of appreciation more apparent since the expansion fumbles with Eternal's essence by adding foes unbefitting to its roster. Most of the bosses aren't so much fought in themselves as they are indirectly through their demonic legions. The second boss is the most compelling one, being a more hardcore version of Calibus, but the final boss only has one attack for the first half of the fight, and then becomes entirely passive as he relies on summoned spirits to do his dirty work. In other words, he has a bland active role at the start of the fight, and is then taken out of the equation with 2 standard encounters turned up to 11, with 2 spirits empowering heavy demons. Since they respawn instantly after death as well, this made my focusing on any of them almost pointless, making prioritization of the spirit's demises necessary, which, as stated before, largely depends on luck based on where other demons are in relation to the spirit, so you can use the microwave beam without dying in place. Its software, for the most part, stays on brand with boss fights that could do with more complexity, even more so than those in the campaign. That's not to say all of the encounters aren't up to par. Playing on the next difficulty down after the campaign feels just right, whereas maintaining the same level would feel like a leap to, say, Nightmare if you played the campaign on Ultraviolence. It's commonplace to see multitudes of super heavy demons, sometimes buffed by spirits that will have them right on your tail until you rip and tear them for good. This expansion's Slayer Gates are an absolute treat to test your mettle, and the makeup and length of encounters all steadily increase in intensity right where you left off in Eternal. The platforming, however, doesn't receive the same treatment. It was fun and adequately engaging in between the carnage with the campaign, but in the expansion, it never quite reaches or goes beyond that. It has every opportunity to do so, especially with platforming races and multi-tiered puzzles with the aquatic setting of the first level, but the level designers didn't leverage the potential of those possibilities. It would have been fun to see a new weapon or type of grenade introduced as well, but the Slayer's inventory is already robust enough. as exemplified in my struggling to remember everything while completely forgetting I had freezing grenades and the Unmaker. It would be like expecting a new weapon from God of War 2018 with a hypothetical expansion. It wouldn't be necessary, since there is so much that can be used from Kratos' existing toolkit by creating new purposes for certain parts of it, which the ancient gods attempts to do, but mostly in the wrong ways. Eternal's ending and teases through writing left some threads loose. Is Samuel Hayden the Seraphim? What was up with Vega saying he's the father? Is the Dark Lord, good old Satan himself, or some other force related to the voice crying out after killing the Conmaker? The expansion answers all of those questions with a series of fetch quests that advance the plot in surprising ways that point to a definitive closure to the overall story. It's a little heavy on the self-seriousness and a deep lore, just as the campaign was, but I can't help but love the universe and how the expansion elaborates and expands upon opaque characters and details. It's hard for me to guess how the story will develop and what alliances will be forged in Part 2. Still, I look forward to seeing what will come from it, and hope someone like the Betrayer will play a part in it, let alone the amicable audience surrogate known as the Intern.
All right, ready for launch, Doom Guy. I'm sorry.
It should be mentioned that Mick Gordon did not return to compose for professionally improper reasons, which is a shame, since his work is considered part and parcel with Doom for its special kind of, let's say, electronicore. Instead, id Software's sound engineer David Levy and composer Andrew Hulshult, who has worked on appropriately similar games like Dusk and Quake Champions, took the reins. Their combined efforts result in tracks that seamlessly blend into each other depending on the level of action going on. The score also skews toward metal rather than Gordon's more experimental work with synths and distortion and glitch sounds. That is, up until you return to Urdak, which has music heavily reminiscent to Gordon's UAC facility jams. They often involved settings with experimentation on demons, which fits Urdak's corrupted landscape. There aren't any riffs that stick out as often as Gordon's work does, but considering the big shoes being filled, his replacements have done a superb job matching and complementing his style. The Ancient Gods Part 1 is exactly what it should be where it counts. A sweatfest of gory rampages through fantastic larger-than-life locations, built with superb, compact, and sometimes unexpectedly creative level design filled with wild enemy pairings aplenty. The platforming and music are just below the threshold of what Eternal established, but the enemy design lightly works against the tried and true formula with artificial, or perhaps misplaced, difficulty, putting road bumps and signs in the fun zone that can't be ignored. Even still, this expansion is only brought down slightly, since it's built upon a near-perfect foundation. For anyone who enjoyed Eternal, I still highly recommend the expansion because of its substance and length, which reminds me of favorites like Wolfenstein: The Old Blood and Destiny: The Taken King. There may not be so much that's new or different, like in Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry or Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea, but here, there's largely more of the same with the ante upped across new places. When it comes to Eternal, that's a prayer answered, even if not fulfilled without flaws.